Pay attention to the bride. Security camera. Burj Al Nakheel Grand Ballroom, October 14th, 9:47 p.m. Her name is Amara Delgado. She is 27 years old. She is laughing at something her new husband just whispered in her ear. Her dress cost $340,000. Her flowers were flown from Amsterdam. 600 people are watching her like she is the most fortunate woman alive. Now watch what the camera captures behind her left shoulder. A man in a white catering uniform who is not moved in 14 minutes. He is not looking at the food. He is not looking at the guests. He is looking only at her. He has a document in his jacket pocket with her name on it. Contract. Signed by her mother. Notarized with a stolen stamp. According to that document, Amara Delgado has been legally promised to another man for 3 years. She does not know this. She is still laughing. She is still looking at her husband. She has no idea that the man standing behind her left shoulder is here to collect what her mother sold. And she has no idea that before this night ends, she will be dead. The flowers arrived from Amsterdam on October 12th, 2 days before the wedding, packed in refrigerated cargo containers that had been loaded at Schiphol Airport under the supervision of a Dutch horticultural logistics company retained specifically for this purpose. The company's job, for which they had been paid $23,000, was to ensure that 40,000 stems of white peonies and blush garden roses arrived in Dubai at precisely the correct stage of bloom. Not fully open, not still closed. The exact intermediate point at which each flower was most alive, most fragrant, most itself. The florist, a woman named Celeste Marchand, flown from Geneva 3 weeks in advance to supervise the installation, had told the logistics company during the initial briefing that she needed every stem to be perfect by the evening of October 14th, and that her definition of perfect was non-negotiable. The logistics company had not argued. The flowers alone cost $180,000. People who spend $180,000 on flowers do not accept approximations of perfect. The chandelier above the ballroom's central floor had been cleaned by hand on the morning of October 14th, beginning at 6 a.m., when the hotel's maintenance team of 8 arrived with microfiber cloths and a scaffold system that took 40 minutes to assemble and 90 minutes to work through. Each crystal was cleaned individually. This had been specified in the event contract under a clause that Sheikh Rafiq Al-Qasimi's event coordinator had added personally, because Rafiq had walked through the ballroom during the venue inspection in August and looked up at the chandelier for a long moment and said very quietly that he wanted the light to be perfect for her. The event coordinator had written it down. The maintenance team had arrived at 6 a.m. The crystals had been cleaned one by one. He had been planning the light for her since April. He had met Amara Delgado in the cardiac recovery ward of the Crescent Gulf Medical Center in the 3rd week of March, when he was in bed 7 following a cardiac episode that had occurred during a board meeting and had frightened everyone in the room except, apparently, Rafiq himself, who had felt it coming for several minutes before it arrived and had used those minutes to finish the point he was making before he sat down and told his deputy to call emergency services. He was 44 years old. He had negotiated contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars across 4 continents. He had sat across from ministers and sovereign wealth fund directors and CEOs of companies whose annual revenue exceeded some countries' GDP. He had never once, in any of those encounters, felt uncertain about what to say or how to say it. He watched Amara Delgado change his 4-line on the 2nd morning of his admission and felt uncertain about what to say. She was checking the monitor readings when he watched her, not performing attentiveness, not executing the motions of clinical care, but genuinely focused on the numbers with the specific quality of concentration that belongs to people who understand that the numbers matter. She had checked them twice. She had written the 2nd reading in her notes and then checked the monitor once more before moving to bed 8, and the 3rd check was not redundant. It was the action of someone who had decided that the cost of being wrong was higher than the cost of 30 additional seconds. He watched her move to the next patient and said nothing. He was not accustomed to saying nothing. He requested the same nurse the following morning. He told the ward coordinator his preference politely and without explanation. He requested her again the morning after. On the morning of his discharge, he waited until she had completed her 1st round's check before asking if he could speak with her for a moment. He told her very carefully, measuring each word the way he measured words in negotiations where the phrasing was everything, that he would like to reach out to her family through the appropriate cultural and formal channels, if she was willing to permit that. He told her he understood if the answer was no and that the answer would not affect the quality of his care if he were ever a patient at Crescent Gulf Medical Center again. She took 3 days to think about it. She spoke to Marisol Cruz, her best friend and fellow nurse, for 2 hours on the second night. She called her mother in Cebu on the third morning. Then she said yes. This is important to establish before anything else. What Rafiq Al-Qasimi felt for Amara Delgado was genuine. This is not a story about a transaction dressed as love. It is a story about genuine love existing inside a situation that had already been corrupted before the love began. Corrupted by a document Amara had never seen, signed by a woman she trusted completely, in a small house in Cebu City while Amara was in Dubai changing 4 lines and checking monitor readings twice and sending 80% of her salary home every month because her family needed it, and she was, at her core and without exception, a person who moved toward wherever the need was greatest. She had worked 14-hour ICU shifts at the Crescent Gulf Medical Center for 3 years. She had not taken a single day off in the 11 months preceding the wedding because she had been saving toward something she described to Marisol, who had asked 3 times over 6 months, gently and then less gently, as simply making sure everyone is okay. She memorized every patient's name on every shift. She called their families after difficult nights on her own time, from her own phone. She had a notebook in her locker at the hospital in which she kept handwritten records of each patient's family members. Names, relationships, the things the patients had mentioned about them during long nights when talking was easier than silence. She used the notebook when she called. The families always knew she had been paying attention. Rafiq Al-Qasimi had learned 4 phrases in Cebuano. He had arranged the lessons through a language coach at his office in the Al Thureya Business Tower, beginning in August, every morning before his first meeting of the day. The coach, a Filipino academic based in Dubai who had taught Arabic, Tagalog, and Cebuano to Gulf business professionals for 12 years, would say later that the Sheikh was not a natural linguist. His ear for tonal variation was imprecise. His pronunciation of the dental consonants in Cebuano required consistent correction across multiple sessions. But he was the most committed student the coach had encountered in 12 years of instruction, and his commitment was of a specific kind. He was not trying to impress anyone. He was trying to be understood by one person. He practiced every morning for 6 weeks. He wanted the pronunciation to be right. He wanted her to hear them and know they had cost him something real. At 8:41 p.m. on October 14th, standing at the altar of the Burj Al Nakhil Grand Ballroom with 600 guests behind him and the hand-polished chandelier throwing fractured light across 40,000 flowers from Amsterdam that had been held at precisely the right temperature for 48 hours so that they would be exactly this open and no more open, Rafiq Al-Qasimi said 4 phrases in Cebuano. His pronunciation was imperfect. It was entirely genuine. The coach had told him at the final session that the phrases were as good as they were going to get and that genuine was worth more than perfect. Rafiq had thanked him and gone back to his office. Amara Delgado, who had not cried once in 3 months of wedding preparation. Not when the dress arrived, not when the flowers were installed, not when Marisol gave a speech at the bridal dinner that made every other person in the room cry, cried then. She stood at the altar in the $340,000 dress and listened to her husband say 4 imperfect phrases in the language she had grown up speaking, the language of her mother and her grandmother and the streets of Cebu City, and she understood that they had cost him something, and she cried because she was a person who understood the weight of what things cost. 600 people applauded. Now watch what the security camera captures at 9:47 p.m., 66 minutes after the ceremony ended and the reception began, and the 4 orchestras, each representing a different musical tradition, because Rafiq had wanted the evening to feel like a world rather than a performance, filled the Burj Al Nakhil Grand Ballroom with sound that cost another $340,000 to produce and was worth every dirham of it. Amara is at the head table. Her head is tilted toward her husband. Her hand rests on his arm. Her body is angled toward him in the way that people angle toward warmth when they have found warmth in a place they did not expect it. She is laughing at something he has just said. Something quiet, something that belongs only to the 2 of them in a room of 600 people. And the laugh is the one Marisol Cruz has known for 6 years. Loud, unguarded, complete, the laugh of a woman who is fully present in the moment she is in. The event photographer, Rafael Moreno, 44 years old, 19 years of wedding photography across 4 continents. Positioned 20 feet from the head table with a camera system that cost more than most people's annual salary, will write in his incident statement to police the following morning that the image he captured at 9:47 p.m. of Amara Delgado laughing in the chandelier light was the most beautiful photograph he had taken in 19 years of this work. He will write that he had looked at it on his camera display during a brief break and felt certain it was the kind of image that defined a career. He does not know, when he writes this, that it is also the last image ever taken of Amara Delgado alive. Now look behind her left shoulder. 19 feet away, standing near the entrance to the service corridor on the east wall of the ballroom, is a man in a white catering uniform. The uniform bears the Al Warda Hospitality Group logo embroidered in gold thread on the breast pocket. The man is 34 years old. His name is Crisanto Vega. He is lean and still in the way of men who have made stillness into a professional discipline. He is holding a silver service tray with both hands, held level, carried with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to the weight and posture of catering work. He has been standing in this position, in this exact location, for 14 minutes. In those 14 minutes, he has not offered the tray's contents to a single guest. He has not moved to replenish the tray from the kitchen. He has not spoken to any of the 17 other Al Warda staff members working the floor around him, none of whom have found his stillness remarkable because stillness in service staff is invisible to the people being served. His eyes have not left Amara Delgado since she sat down. Crisanto Vega is not an Al Warda Hospitality Group employee. His name does not appear on any staff roster for the evening. He has never worked in catering. The vendor badge clipped to the breast pocket of his uniform. The badge that scanned correctly when he entered through the service dock at 7:22 p.m. and was waved through by a security officer who checked the scan result and saw a green light and moved to the next person. Was purchased 6 days before the wedding through an encrypted messaging application, printed on commercial cardstock using stolen employee data, sourced from a data breach at a catering supply company in Sharjah 3 months earlier. The breach had been reported to the Sharjah Cybercrime Unit at the time and logged as a low-level commercial data theft. Nobody had flagged it as a precursor to anything. The stolen data had been packaged and sold through the encrypted channel for $200 per credential set. Vega had purchased 1 set. He had printed the badge using a commercial printer at a business services shop in Dara. He had entered the Burj Al Nakhil service dock at 7:22 p.m. and the badge had scanned green and he had moved through the door with the calm of a man who understood that calm was itself a kind of credential, that the security officer checking the scanner was looking at the light, not the face, and that a green light and a composed face together were all the authorization anyone needed. He had been in Dubai for 18 days before the wedding. He had used those 18 days carefully. Inside his jacket pocket, beneath the catering uniform against his chest, is a document. 11 pages, printed on legal weight paper, bearing a notarial stamp from a law office in Cebu City that had its certification credentials stolen 3 years earlier. The document is a proxy marriage consent form. It is written in a combination of formal Filipino legal language and English. The bride named in the document is Amara Delgado, identified by her Philippine passport number, her nursing license registration number, her Dubai residency permit number, and her home address in Cebu City. The consent to the marriage arrangement has been provided by her mother, Rosalinda Delgado, signing on her daughter's behalf under the authority of a parental proxy provision that exists in a narrow category of overseas worker placement law and which had been, in this document, applied in a context for which it was not intended and could not legally support. The beneficiary of the arrangement, the man named in the document as Amara's intended, is Danilo Reyes. Danilo Reyes is not in this ballroom. He is in Manila. He has been in Manila for 9 days, which is exactly where a man in his position should be, not present at the location of his operations, never traceable to the physical execution of his decisions, always at the precise distance that allows him to direct without being connected. He is 51 years old. He is widowed. He owns a property in Quezon City with a swimming pool and a garden that his late wife planted and that he has maintained exactly as she left it for 6 years. He runs a placement agency called Goldbridge Overseas Recruitment from a glass-fronted office in Salcedo Village, Makati City, and he has been running it for 11 years, and in those 11 years he has built, beneath the legitimate surface of the agency, a secondary operation that has touched 37 women's lives in ways that none of those women consented to and most of them never fully understood. He paid Rosalinda Delgado $42,000 for her daughter's signed consent. He has spent 3 years believing that the payment made the arrangement real. He has spent 3 years believing that the woman laughing at the head table under the hand-polished chandelier in the $340,000 dress belongs to him, was committed to him, was promised to him, was his by the legal fiction he constructed with a stolen notarial stamp and a mother's desperation and $42,000 that he has never once considered the moral cost of spending. He made his final call to Crisanto Vega at 6 p.m. on October 14th, 90 minutes before Vega entered the service dock. The call lasted 4 minutes and 12 seconds. The content of the call is not recorded. But at 9:51 p.m., Crisanto Vega sends a text message to a number saved in his prepaid phone under no name. The message is 5 words. She is here. Proceed tonight. The reply arrives in 30 seconds. It is 1 word. Confirmed. Amara Delgado is still laughing. The photographer is still shooting. The chandelier is still perfect. The 40,000 flowers from Amsterdam are at precisely their correct stage of bloom. Nobody in this room, not the 600 guests, not the 4 orchestras, not the husband who practiced 4 phrases in her language every morning for 6 weeks, knows that the woman at the center of all of it has been sold, signed, and the collection has already been authorized. The camera captures her laughing. It will capture her laughing for another 22 minutes. At 10:09 p.m., dancing with Marisol Cruz near the orchestra. At 10:14 p.m., speaking with a group of Rafiq's business associates who will later tell investigators she had been warm and funny and had made them feel immediately at ease. At 10:17 p.m., standing at the head table with her hand on her husband's shoulder and her head thrown back, laughing at something Rafiq has said to a guest. At 10:22 p.m., the security camera at the East Corridor captures her walking through the service hallway door. After that, there is nothing. Table 14 is positioned along the western wall of the Burj Al Nakhil Grand Ballroom. 40 feet from the head table, its sight line to the ceremony altar partially obscured by a 5-foot floor arrangement of white peonies in a crystal vase that Celeste Marchand had positioned there specifically because she felt the western wall needed anchoring, and because the density of bloom at that height would catch the light from the chandelier at exactly the right angle after 9 p.m. The arrangement had cost $4,200 and Marchand had been correct about the light. Nobody sitting at table 14 had commented on the flowers because the flowers were simply part of the world that had been built around them, and people rarely comment on the architecture of a world they have been placed inside. The table seats 8. 7 of its occupants are nursing colleagues and their guests. Flown to Dubai from the Philippines as part of the guest list, Rafiq had assembled over 2 months with the specific intention of making sure that the people most important to Amara's life before him were present for the beginning of her life with him. He had asked Marisol Cruz for the names. He had arranged the flights himself through his travel coordinator without mentioning it to Amara until the invitations were already sent, because he had wanted it to be something she received rather than something she organized. When she found out, she had looked at him for a long moment and then said, in English very quietly, "You paid attention." He had said, "I always pay attention to you." It was the least showy thing he had said to her in 6 months of courtship, and it was the thing she remembered most. The 8th person at table 14 has not touched her food. Her plate, braised lamb with saffron rice and a garnish of pomegranate seeds that the Al Warda kitchen had spent 40 minutes plating to the exacting specification of the event's culinary director, sits in front of her exactly as it was placed, undisturbed, the pomegranate seeds still in their precise arrangement, the sauce not yet broken. The bread roll beside the plate has not been moved. The champagne flute to her right has not been lifted. She has been sitting in this chair for 2 hours and 11 minutes, and she has given every external impression of being present. She smiled at the ceremony. She applauded when Rafiq said the Cebuano phrases. She accepted congratulations from the colleagues seated around her with the appropriate warmth. And yet she has not eaten, has not drunk, has not turned her eyes from the service entrance on the east wall for more than 30 consecutive seconds since she sat down at 7:36 p.m. Her name is Rosalinda Delgado. She is 58 years old. She is wearing a floor-length gown in deep green that she borrowed from her neighbor Cora Pacaldo in Cebu 2 weeks before the wedding, because the gown Cora wore to her own daughter's debut 5 years ago was the most formal garment within Rosalinda's immediate social circle, and Rosalinda did not own anything appropriate for an event of this kind, and could not afford to buy something, and could not ask Amara for money for this specific purpose without explaining why she needed it to be something suitable for a $4 million wedding attended by Gulf royalty and European business figures. The gown fit imperfectly across the shoulders. Cora was narrower than Rosalinda, and Rosalinda had let out the seam herself with thread that was close but not exact in color, and the alteration was visible if you looked directly at it, which nobody at this wedding had done because nobody at this wedding was looking at table 14. She arrived in Dubai 4 days earlier on a flight that Rafiq had arranged and paid for, economy class, because Rosalinda had specifically requested economy class when the travel coordinator called to confirm the booking, because she had not wanted to accept more than what was necessary, and because the distance between her life and this event was already so vast that extending it further into first class felt like a kind of dishonesty she could not sustain. Her room at the Al Maha Residence Hotel, 3 blocks from the Burj Al Nakheel, had a view of the marina from its window and a bathroom finished in white marble that was larger than her kitchen at home. She had stood in the bathroom doorway on the first morning with her hand on the frame and looked at the marble floor for a long time without going in. She is the mother of the bride. She should be the second happiest person in this building. She has instead been the most frightened person in this building since 7:30 p.m., when she looked toward the service entrance during the cocktail hour and saw a man in a white catering uniform take up a position near the east corridor with a tray. He did not put down an eyes that she understood, with a clarity that arrived fully formed and without transition, were fixed on Amara. She did not recognize his face. She had never met Crisanto Vega in any direct sense, had never been given a name, a photograph, a description. What she recognized was the function. Danilo Reyes had told her, in a phone call 3 weeks before the wedding, delivered in the same calm professional voice he had used for every conversation they had ever had, that if the marriage to the Sheikh proceeded he would send someone to the wedding. He had said someone the way a logistics coordinator says someone, neutrally, functionally, as though the word described a resource being deployed rather than a human being being directed toward another human being for purposes Rosalinda had spent 3 weeks refusing to name to herself. She had asked what the someone would do. Reyes had said that the someone would ensure Amara understood her prior commitments and the consequences of disregarding them. He had said it calmly. He had said it the way he said everything, with the composed authority of a man who has never in his life doubted his right to the outcome he is pursuing. Rosalinda had told herself the someone would be a lawyer. She had constructed this interpretation in the 3 weeks between that phone call and October 14th, and she had maintained it with the determined irrationality of a person who understands, underneath the construction, exactly what they are refusing to look at. A legal representative. A formal document. Something that operated within a framework of procedure and process and courts and paper. Something that could be contested, redirected, resolved. She had told herself this in the small house in Cebu, and on the economy flight to Dubai, and in the marble bathroom she could not bring herself to enter, and in the borrowed green gown that pulled slightly across her shoulders, and at table 14 for 2 hours and 11 minutes while the food grew cold in front of her and the champagne went flat and the orchards of white peonies from Amsterdam caught the chandelier light exactly the way Celeste Marchand had calculated they would. She had told herself this until 7:30 p.m., when she looked at the man near the east corridor and understood, with the same fully formed clarity as before, that he was not a lawyer. That Danilo Reyes had not sent a lawyer. That what Danilo Reyes had sent was something she had known all along and had been unable to hold in her body without ceasing to function, and so had simply declined to hold at all. Marisol Cruz notices Rosalinda at 9:53 p.m. Marisol is 26 years old. She has been Amara's closest friend for 6 years. They met on their first day of orientation at the Crescent Gulf Medical Center, were assigned adjacent lockers, discovered within 20 minutes that they were from the same province, and had been functionally inseparable since then in the specific way of people who find each other in a foreign country and recognize something essential. Marisol is the maid of honor. She has been present at every stage of the wedding preparation, has managed 4 separate vendor disputes, has delivered a speech at the bridal dinner that made Amara laugh so hard she had to hold the table, and has spent the evening of October 14th moving through the ballroom with the quiet efficiency of someone who has decided that her job tonight is to ensure that everything is exactly what Amara deserves. She notices things. It is the quality that makes her an exceptional ICU nurse, the ability to register the detail that deviates from the expected pattern before the deviation becomes critical, and it is the quality that makes her an exceptional friend, because she applies the same attention to people that she applies to clinical readings. Every person in this ballroom is watching Amara. Rosalinda Delgado is watching a door. Marisol notices this the way she notices a flatlined reading on a monitor she was not expecting to flatline. Not as information to be processed later, but as something requiring immediate response. She sets down her dessert plate, the pomegranate lamb, also untouched, because Marisol has been too busy managing the evening to eat, and moves through the ballroom along the perimeter, avoiding the dance floor where two of Rafiq's cousins are performing an enthusiastic and technically ambitious interpretation of a song the orchestra has accommodated with visible good humor. She reaches table 14 at 9:56 p.m. She sits in the empty chair beside Rosalinda, the chair that belongs to a nursing colleague who has been on the dance floor for 40 minutes, and places her hand on the table where Rosalinda can see it and says, in Cebuano very quietly, "Are you all right?" Rosalinda looks at her. Then she looks at Amara at the head table. Amara laughing, Amara angled toward her husband. Amara lit by the chandelier that was cleaned crystal by crystal at 6 a.m. this morning so that the light would be perfect for her. Then Rosalinda stands and says she needs a moment of air and she needs to make a call, and she moves toward the service corridor on the east side before Marisol has time to do anything except register, in the part of her brain that processes the deviations from expected patterns, that Rosalinda Delgado is moving toward the same corridor that the man with the catering tray has been standing near for the past 2 hours. Marisol follows her immediately. The service hallway beyond the kitchen entrance is narrow, wide enough for 2 people to pass if they turn sideways, and lit by fluorescent panels that produce a light so different in quality from the chandelier 40 feet away that stepping into the corridor from the ballroom feels like changing countries. It smells of industrial cleaning solution and warm bread from the catering prep area and the faint metallic undertone of the building's ventilation system. Rosalinda is already 20 feet down the hallway, her back to Marisol, her borrowed green gown slightly wrong across the shoulder seam, her phone pressed hard against her ear. She is speaking in Cebuano, in a voice pitched low and urgent, and Marisol catches fragments as she moves toward her. He is already inside. I don't know what to do. I don't know what he is going to do. And then a name, said once very quietly, the way you say something that has been living in your throat for so long that saying it aloud feels less like speech and more like finally removing something that was lodged there. The name is Danilo. Marisol does not know what the name means yet. She will know in 11 minutes. Rosalinda ends the call. She turns. She sees Marisol standing at the corridor entrance in her maid of honor gown with her hand half extended, and her face carrying the expression of someone who has followed a person into a hallway, because the alternative was doing nothing, and doing nothing was not available to her. The 2 women look at each other under the fluorescent light. From the ballroom, 40 feet and 1 steel-framed door away, the orchestra begins a new arrangement. Something warm and sweeping that filters through the soundproofed wall as a muffled swell, barely present, almost imagined. Then Rosalinda Delgado sits down on the floor of the service corridor in Cora Picaldo's borrowed green gown and begins to tell the truth. She tells it in order. She tells it without stopping, which is the manner of someone who has been holding a thing in such tension for such a long time that once the holding breaks, the entire structure releases at once. She tells Marisol about the loan, 2.4 million Cuban pesos, 3 years ago, from a man named Danilo Reyes who operated an overseas placement agency called Goldbridge Overseas Recruitment in Makati City. She explains that she had borrowed the money against Amara's nursing credentials, against the future income of a daughter who was working 14-hour ICU shifts in Dubai and sending 80% of her salary home, and who had no knowledge that her credentials had been used as collateral for a loan her mother had taken without telling her. She explains that she had understood it as a manageable financial arrangement and that the understanding had been wrong. She explains the revision. 8 months after the loan, the phone call, the calm professional voice explaining that the debt could be cleared entirely if Rosalinda would sign a document. Proxy marriage consent form. Amara placed with Reyes himself. Not as an employee. Not as a contracted worker. As a wife. Reyes's wife. A man she had never met. A man who had looked at her credentials and her photograph and her character references from her nursing employer and decided, with the calm of someone announcing a business decision, that she was the woman he intended to marry. She explains that she signed. She explains that she took the money. She tells Marisol that she told herself she would explain it to Amara when the time was right, and that the time was never right, and that she had kept telling herself the time would come, and then Rafiq proposed, and she had called Reyes in a panic, and his voice on that call had been different from every other call. Not calm. Something beneath the calm that she had not heard before, something that she recognized but could not name, and he had said, "She made a choice she was not authorized to make. That has consequences." And he had told her the wedding needed to be stopped. She had told him she could not stop it. And he had listened and said very quietly, the last thing he said before he ended the call, "Then I will send someone who will." Marisol listens to all of it without speaking. When Rosalinda finishes, the fluorescent light hums above them. The ventilation system moves air through the narrow corridor. 40 feet away through the soundproofed wall, the orchestra plays something warm and sweeping that neither of them can fully hear. Marisol is quiet for 3 seconds. Then she says, in a voice that carries the specific quality of someone who has processed information faster than the situation allows, and arrived at the only conclusion available. "We have to tell Amara. Right now. Not in a minute. Right now." Rosalinda reaches for her arm. "If we tell her here at the wedding in front of everyone. If we don't tell her," Marisol says, pulling free, "and something happens to her tonight." She does not finish the sentence. She cannot finish it. She is already moving back toward the ballroom door, already calculating the path across the dance floor to the head table, already composing in her mind the words she will say to Amara's ear so that Amara will come without asking why in front of 600 people. She reaches the head table at 10:19 p.m. She leans down. She says, "I need you to come with me right now. Don't ask me here. Just come." Amara Delgado looks at her best friend's face. 6 years of friendship. 6 years of watching this face across ICU wards during long nights, across the table of the small apartment they shared in the first year of their Dubai contracts, across every situation that had required the two of them to understand each other faster than language allows. She sees something in Marisol's face that she has never seen there before. She cannot name it precisely. She knows it is not small. She excuses herself from the table. She takes Rafiq's hand briefly, says something close to his ear. "I'll be right back. Marisol needs me for a moment." And she follows Marisol toward the east corridor door. At 10:22 p.m., the security camera mounted at the junction of the ballroom's east wall and the corridor entrance captures 2 women in formal gowns pushing through the service door. The woman in the ivory dress, the $340,000 dress, the dress that 11 artisans spent 9 months embroidering in a Paris atelier, is Amara Delgado. The camera holds them for 11 seconds. Then the angle shifts to its next position in the rotation cycle. The camera does not see them again. At 10:24 p.m., Crisanto Vega sets the silver catering tray down against the east corridor wall. He places it carefully, handle inward, balanced against the baseboard. He does not pick it up again. He adjusts the front of his catering uniform. He rolls his right sleeve down 1 additional inch, covering the lower edge of the anchor tattoo on his forearm. Then he moves toward the east service corridor door and pushes through it without breaking stride, with the calm of a man who has been waiting for a specific moment for 18 days and has arrived at it and is simply doing the next thing, the thing he has planned and rehearsed and prepared across 18 days in a guest house in Naif and 9 convenience store visits before 7 a.m. and a folded city map he has carried until he no longer needed it. The tray is found by forensic technicians at 2:30 a.m. the following morning. Contains a single folded white napkin. Beneath the napkin there is nothing. The steel pipe that was beneath the napkin all evening, that has been present in this ballroom since 7:22 p.m., carried through 600 guests and 4 orchestras and the hand-polished chandelier light and the 40,000 flowers from Amsterdam, has been taken with him. It has been in this room all evening. Nobody looked twice at a catering tray. At 11:06 p.m., Sheikh Rafiq Al-Qasimi looks around the ballroom for his wife. He does not see her. He looks for Marisol Cruz. He does not see her either. He sends Amara a text at 11:08 p.m. "Where are you? People are asking about you." He sets his phone face down on the table. He turns to greet a group of guests who have approached the head table. He is smiling. He is, by every external indication, a man at the center of the best night of his life. He will look at the phone again at 11:19 p.m. and see that the message has not been delivered. The blue tick has not appeared, which means the phone is either off or out of range or some third thing he cannot identify, and he will feel the first movement of something he cannot name, something that exists beneath the surface of the evening like a structural problem exists beneath a floor that still appears solid. The text is never read. At 11:34 p.m., a hotel housekeeping attendant named Priya Meenakshi, 31 years old, 7 months employed at the Burj Al Nakheel, opens the north service stairwell door to retrieve a cleaning cart she left on the second landing at the beginning of her shift. She opens the door. She sees the motion-activated utility bulb trigger above her. The landing had been dark before she opened the door, before her movement activated the light. And in the 2 seconds between darkness and illumination, she sees a shape at the base of the stairs that the darkness had concealed and the light now reveals with absolute completeness. She stands in the doorway for 4 seconds. Her hand is still on the door handle. The cart is on the second landing above her, and she will not reach it tonight. Then she runs. She runs the full length of the north service corridor, through the fire door at the corridor's end, into the main hotel hallway, and she does not stop running until she reaches the front desk, where the night duty manager is reviewing a check-in log and looks up at the sound of her arrival and sees her face and picks up the emergency line before she has finished her first sentence. In the ballroom 40 feet away, the fourth orchestra is playing something warm and celebratory. The chandeliers are still perfect. The flowers are still open to exactly their correct degree of bloom. 600 people are still eating, still dancing, still raising glasses to the most fortunate woman alive. The call came in to Dubai Emergency Services at 11:41 p.m. The dispatcher logged it as an incident at the Burj Al Nakheel Hotel. North service stairwell, a woman down, unresponsive. The attending paramedics, Yusuf Hamdan and Dina Saeed from the Al Rashidiyah Emergency Station, arrived at 11:53 p.m. and entered through the hotel's service dock on the north side of the building. They reached the stairwell at 11:56 p.m. Amara Delgado was at the base of the north stairwell, on the ground floor landing. She was on her back. The $340,000 dress was spread around her on the concrete floor in a way that looked, from the stairwell entrance, almost arranged, the fabric fanned out, the embroidery catching the bare utility bulb above. She was not breathing. Her pulse was absent. Her neck bore a single ligature mark, deep and continuous, consistent with a cord or thin rope applied with significant force from behind. There were no defensive wounds on her hands. There was no sign of struggle on the landing itself. She had not seen it coming. She had not had time to raise her hands. Yusuf Hamdan performed resuscitation for 9 minutes. Dina Saeed called the assessment in at 12:07 a.m. The assessment was deceased. Time of death estimated between 10:30 and 11 p.m. During those same minutes, between 10:30 and 11 p.m., 600 guests had been eating dessert and dancing and applauding in a ballroom 40 feet from where the bride lay on a concrete floor. For orchestras had been playing. The chandeliers had been throwing their fractured light. Nobody had known. The north service stairwell had no connection to any sound the ballroom could reach, and the door at the base of the stairwell was steel-framed and soundproofed for the hotel's acoustic requirements. The building had been designed for discretion. Tonight, discretion had been a weapon. Hotel security sealed the north stairwell at 12:09 a.m. The front desk manager made 2 calls simultaneously, to Dubai Police Emergency Operations, and, with visible reluctance and the understanding that there was no version of this that was not catastrophic, to the ballroom's event coordinator. Sheikh Rafiq Al-Qasimi was told at 12:23 a.m. The event coordinator approached him near the north exit of the ballroom, away from the remaining guests, and spoke quietly. Rafiq listened. His expression did not change during the 30 seconds the coordinator was speaking. When the coordinator finished, Rafiq was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Take me to her." He was not permitted into the stairwell. A hotel security officer intercepted him at the north corridor and told him, as gently as the situation allowed, that the scene was being secured for police investigation and that entry was not possible. Rafiq stood in the corridor outside the sealed stairwell door for 11 minutes without speaking. The event coordinator stood beside him because he did not know what else to do. A guest, walking past on the way to the restroom, recognized the sheikh and said, "Wonderful evening. Where has your beautiful bride gone? Rafiq looked at the man. He said nothing. The man laughed at what he assumed was a joke and continued walking. Detective Noor Khalil arrived at the Burj Al Nakhil at 1:45 a.m. She was 39 years old, 14 years with the Dubai Criminal Investigation Department, 6 of them in the Violent Crime and Organized Offenses Division. She had been called personally by her superintendent, who had seen the preliminary report and recognized immediately that a murdered bride at a $4 million sheikh's wedding required the most experienced investigator available. Khalil had been asleep for 2 hours when the call came. She arrived at the hotel 40 minutes later with a worn leather notebook, a cracked spine case file folder, and the specific quality of alertness that comes not from caffeine but from the recognition that what you are walking into is going to require everything you have. She walked the north stairwell first. The forensic team from the Dubai CID Technical Evidence Unit had been processing the scene for 40 minutes before she arrived. She stood at the top of the stairwell and looked down without touching anything. The landing was concrete, unfinished, utilitarian, the bare bones of the building that the $4 million event in the adjacent wing had been designed to conceal. The forensic team had already documented the ligature mark pattern, the absence of defensive wounds, the position of the body. Khalil noted the same things and wrote 3 additional observations in her notebook. The door from the main corridor had no camera. The door from the service dock had no camera. The utility bulb above the landing had been switched off when Priya Meenakshi opened the door. It was motion activated, triggered by her entry. Before that, the landing had been dark. Someone had known the landing would be dark. She wrote in red ink, "He chose this location before tonight. Knew the camera gaps. Knew the light. This was not where he found her. This is where he brought her." She wrote below that she trusted whoever led her here. No struggle. She wrote below that find who called her away from the ballroom. At 2:15 a.m., she reviewed the ballroom security footage. She found Marisol Cruz leaning down to Amara's ear at 10:19 p.m. She found both women entering the East Service hallway at 10:22 p.m. She found Crisanto Vega setting down his tray at 10:24 p.m. and moving toward the East Service corridor. She found no further footage of Amara Delgado anywhere in the building's 23 cameras after 10:22 p.m. She found Marisol Cruz emerging from the East Service corridor alone at 10:51 p.m., moving fast, heading toward the hotel security station near the main entrance. Amara had gone into the East corridor with Marisol at 10:22 p.m. Marisol had come out alone at 10:51 p.m. 29 minutes. In those 29 minutes, Amara had been moved from the East corridor to the North stairwell, 2 separate sections of the building, connected through the service labyrinth that ran behind the guest-facing walls. A path that required knowledge of the building's layout. A path that had no cameras. Khalil circled 10:22 p.m. in red. Then she circled 10:51 p.m. in red. Then she drew a line between them and wrote, 29 minutes. Find Marisol Cruz immediately. She found her in a hotel conference room on the 3rd floor, sitting with a victim liaison officer, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she had not touched, her face carrying the expression of a person who understood exactly what had happened and was holding herself responsible for every second of it. Khalil sat across from her and said, "Tell me everything, from the beginning. Leave nothing out." Marisol Cruz told her everything. Took 26 minutes. When she finished, she put the untouched tea down on the table and said, "I should have gone straight to Amara. Instead, I went to get security. I left her alone in that corridor." She stopped. "I left her alone with whatever was in that corridor." Khalil wrote in black for 15 minutes without stopping. Then she wrote 2 names in red. She drew a box around both of them. Then she looked at Marisol Cruz and said, "Where is the mother?" Rosalinda Delgado was found at 3:10 a.m. sitting on the floor of the East Service corridor, the same corridor where she had told Marisol the truth 3 hours earlier. She had not moved. She was still in the borrowed green gown. Her phone was in her lap, screen dark. She had not called anyone. She had not left the building. She had sat in the fluorescent corridor and waited because there was nowhere on earth she could think to go. A Filipino consular duty officer, Attorney Carmela Vistan, reached by the hotel's front desk at Khalil's request, arrived at 3:28 a.m., and sat beside Rosalinda on the corridor floor for 4 minutes before either of them spoke. Then Rosalinda said, in Cebuano very quietly, "She is dead, isn't she?" It was not a question. Attorney Vistan answered honestly, "Yes." Rosalinda closed her eyes. She kept them closed for a long time. The fluorescent light hummed above her. From somewhere distant in the building, a room service cart moved along a corridor, wheels clicking against tile, the mundane mechanics of a hotel night continuing regardless. Then Rosalinda opened her eyes and said, "I need to speak to the detective." The formal interview began at 4 a.m. in a hotel conference room. Detective Khalil sat across from Rosalinda Delgado with a recorder on the table between them and Attorney Vistan in the corner chair and the worn leather notebook open on her knee. Rosalinda did not ask for time. She did not ask for water. She placed both hands flat on the table, the same way she had placed them flat at table 14 earlier that evening, watching the service entrance, and she began to speak. She spoke for 41 minutes without stopping. She told Khalil about the loan. 2.4 million Cuban pesos, borrowed 3 years ago from Danilo Reyes through his agency Goldbridge Overseas Recruitment in Makati City. She told Khalil about the revision 8 months later, the phone call, the offer to clear the debt in exchange for signed consent to a proxy marriage arrangement. She described the document she had signed. 11 pages, a notarial stamp she had not examined carefully. Language she had read quickly because the man sitting across from her had been calm and professional, and the debt had been crushing her for 8 months, and she had been afraid. She told Khalil what Danilo Reyes had told her about himself and about his intentions toward Amara. He was widowed. He was established. He was, in his own framing, offering Amara a comfortable life with a man who had the resources to provide for her in ways that a nurse's salary could not match. He spoke about Amara not as a financial asset but as a woman he had decided to marry, a woman whose credentials and character he had reviewed, whose photograph he had seen, whom he had, in his own mind, already chosen. He referred to the proxy consent document not as a contract but as a commitment. He said the word commitment multiple times. He said that once a commitment was made, it was a matter of honor to see it honored. When Sheikh Rafiq proposed 6 months ago, Rosalinda had called Reyes immediately. His response, she told Khalil, had been quiet and very specific. He had said, "She has made a decision that was not hers to make. I am a patient man, but I am not a man who accepts being humiliated." He had told Rosalinda the wedding needed to be stopped. She had told him she could not stop it. He had said, "Then I will handle what comes after it." She had not known what that meant. She had told herself she did not know what it meant because understanding it would have required her to act in a way she did not have the courage to act. She had flown to Dubai on Rafiq's money and sat in a hotel bathroom with marble tiles and told herself it would be fine. She had watched the service entrance all evening because she was afraid. And she had been right to be afraid, and she had done nothing, and now her daughter was dead on a concrete floor in a building designed to be beautiful. Khalil let the silence sit for a full minute after Rosalinda finished. Then she wrote in black for 10 minutes. She wrote everything, the loan amount, the dates, the document description, the exact language Reyes had used in the final phone call, the phrase "I am not a man who accepts being humiliated." She wrote it all in black because it was confirmed fact now, spoken under formal record with a consular officer present, and it would hold. Then she wrote 3 things in red. The first, Reyes did not send Vega to frighten her. He sent Vega to remove her. This was not a warning, it was an execution of a decision Reyes made the day Rafiq proposed. The second, the document gave Reyes a legal fiction he had convinced himself was real. He believed the contract made her his. He believed the wedding was theft. The third, he is in Manila. He is not running. He does not think he has done anything wrong. She underlined the last sentence twice. At 6 a.m., with the first gray light beginning outside the hotel's east-facing windows and the ballroom below still strewn with flowers that nobody had cleared, Khalil stepped outside the conference room and called her superintendent. She told him she had a full confession from the victim's mother establishing motive, identity, and the operational relationship between the suspect in Manila and the suspect still inside the UAE. She told him she needed 2 things simultaneously: a UAE arrest warrant for Crisanto Vega and an Interpol red notice and extradition request for Danilo Reyes processed through the Ministry of Justice at the highest priority level. Her superintendent said, "How solid is the confession?" Khalil said, "A mother just told me she sold her daughter to the man who had her killed. It is the most solid thing I have ever sat across from in 14 years. He authorized both requests at 6:08 a.m. At 6:30 a.m., Sheikh Rafiq Al-Qasimi was interviewed by Khalil in a private room at Al-Noor General Hospital, where he had been taken at 2 a.m. at the insistence of a family physician who had found his blood pressure at a level requiring monitoring. He sat in the hospital chair in his wedding suit. He had not changed, had not been given the opportunity to change, and answered every question directly and completely. He knew nothing about Rosalinda's debt or the proxy consent document or Danilo Reyes. He had conducted a background review of Amara's legal status before the engagement through his family's legal team. Nothing had surfaced. The document existed in a layer of the system a standard search would not reach. Reyes had been careful about that specifically. When the interview ended, Rafiq sat for a moment without speaking. Then he said, "The man in Manila, does he understand what he has done?" Khalil said, "He believes he was wronged." Rafiq looked at her for a long time. Then he looked at the window. Then he said nothing more. Crisanto Vega had been in Dubai for 18 days before the wedding. The UAE Federal Border Authority confirmed this at 7 a.m. on October 15th, when Khalil's request for entry records cleared the system. He had arrived on a tourist visa processed through a Manila travel agency in the Ermita district, legitimate, licensed, one of hundreds processing thousands of applications annually with no mechanism to flag an applicant whose criminal exposure existed only as an open investigation file in a Philippine national police system that had never produced a formal charge. He had declared tourism. He had listed accommodation at a guest house in Naif, Dara. He had flown budget carrier into Al Maktoum International Airport and passed through arrivals without incident. Khalil sent a team to the Naif guest house at 7:30 a.m. The room had been vacated. The owner, Harun Sabri, 62, 18 years operating the property, said the occupant had checked out between midnight and 1 a.m. on October 15th, paid his final week in advance and left without taking everything. On the shelf above the wash basin, a spare catering uniform, identical to the one Vega had worn into the ballroom. On the floor beside the narrow bed, 3 receipts from a convenience store on Sikket Al-Khail Road, dated across the preceding 2 weeks. Water, protein bars, a city map purchased from a bookshop near the Gold Souk, receipt folded and tucked inside one of the protein bar wrappers. The city map was gone. He had taken it with him. Khalil pulled the convenience store's security footage. Vega appeared on camera 9 times across the 18 days before the wedding, always between 6 o'clock and 7 a.m., always cash, always the same items. On 4 visits, his right arm was visible below a rolled sleeve. The anchor tattoo, small, dark, inside the right forearm, was clear in 2 frames with sufficient resolution for the forensic imaging team to confirm it matched the Interpol photograph precisely. He was methodical. He had arrived 18 days early to study the building. Khalil understood this the moment she assembled the timeline. The Burj Al Nakhil's service corridors, the camera positions, the north stairwell's darkness, the motion-activated utility bulb, the door that made no sound. He had not improvised any of it. He had walked those corridors before the wedding. He had found the landing. He had decided, days before October 14th, that the north stairwell was where it would happen. What Khalil did not yet know, but established by 10 a.m., was how he had known the building's interior well enough to plan with that specificity. The answer was Bassam Okafor. Bassam Okafor was 29 years old, a junior events coordinator in the Burj Al Nakhil's hospitality division, assigned to large-scale private events including the Al-Qasimi wedding. He had been responsible for vendor access management. He had access to the hotel's internal layout documentation, floor plans, service corridor maps, utility access points, as part of his coordination role. His personal bank account showed a cash deposit of 8,000 dirhams on October 10th, 4 days before the wedding. The deposit carried no documentation. It had been made at a branch ATM in Dubai at 7:43 a.m. on a Sunday. Khalil's team brought him in at 2 p.m. on October 15th. He had not slept since the evening of the 14th. He sat across from Khalil in the interview room at Dubai CID headquarters in Al Tor and did not request a lawyer before she finished her second question. He told her everything in 34 minutes. A man had approached him 6 weeks before the wedding at a coffee shop near the hotel where Okafor took his lunch. The man, compact, quiet, and anchor tattoo partially visible below his cuff, had explained that he needed 2 things: access to the hotel's internal service corridor maps, and confirmation of the north stairwell's camera coverage or absence of it. He had said the information was for a security assessment. He had paid 8,000 dirhams in a hotel lobby envelope 3 days later. Okafor had delivered the maps and the camera. Information in a sealed envelope left at the coffee shop under a table. He had told himself it was a minor thing. He had not asked what it was for. He had found out like everyone else at midnight. The vendor badge Vega used was traced to a data breach at a Sharjah catering supply company 3 months earlier. The forged badge had been produced from stolen employee data. The booking for Vega's flight from Manila to Dubai was traced to a Makati City internet cafe through an IP address retained by the booking platform server. The booking had been made 21 days before Vega's departure, within the cafe's 14-day security footage retention window by a margin of 7 hours. The footage showed a man at Terminal 7 for 13 minutes. Round-faced, gold watch on the left wrist. He had chosen Terminal 7 because it was the only one whose angle made a clear facial capture impossible from the cafe's single-mounted camera. He had sat there specifically. Danilo Reyes was 51 years old. He had operated Goldbridge overseas recruitment from a registered Makati City address for 11 years. The agency held a legitimate POEA license. It had passed 4 regulatory audits. It had a glass-fronted office in Salcedo Village with padded waiting room chairs and potted plants and a receptionist who had worked the front desk for 4 years and genuinely believed she worked for a placement agency. Beneath this, a secondary operation. 37 women, all Filipino, all in caregiving or medical professions, all placed into Gulf arrangements through proxy consent documents signed by family members, predominantly mothers carrying debt to Reyes himself. In most cases, the debt had been deliberately engineered. A legitimate-seeming loan offered at the precise moment a family was most vulnerable, structured so that repayment through cash was functionally impossible, leaving the consent arrangement as the only available resolution. 37 women. 29 were traceable. 8 were not. Reyes had not, in every case, claimed the placed women as wives. In most arrangements he functioned as a broker, placing women into Gulf households for financial purposes, receiving placement fees from the receiving parties. But Amara Delgado's case was different. The Interpol file that came back from the Manila NCB at 10:30 a.m. on October 15th contained a detail that Khalil read twice. In the documentation for Amara's arrangement, there was no receiving party listed, no Gulf household, no broker client. The beneficiary was Reyes himself under his own name with a Quezon City residential address. He had not sold Amara to someone else. He had kept the arrangement for himself. He had decided she would be his wife. He had built a legal fiction around that decision and paid Rosalinda Delgado $42,000 to ratify it. When Rafiq proposed, Reyes had experienced it not as a business complication but as a personal betrayal. A woman he had paid for, committed to, waited for, being taken by another man. The calm voice on Rosalinda's phone. I am not a man who accepts being humiliated. That sentence, Khalil now understood, was not a threat from a trafficker protecting a commercial asset. It was a sentence from a man who believed his honor had been violated, who believed he had been stolen from, who had acted accordingly. At 6 p.m. on October 15th, 18 hours after Amara Delgado had laughed at something her husband whispered in her ear, Khalil sat in her car in the hotel car park with her notebook open on the passenger seat and both the red and black ink pens in her hand, and she looked at the case in its entirety for the first time. She had a dead woman in a $340,000 dress on a concrete floor. She had a mother's confession that explained every element of the motive. She had a suspect in a Manila house with a swimming pool who believed he had been wronged. She had a second suspect who had been in Dubai for 18 days preparing the location of a murder and who had vanished through a door that left no record at approximately 11 p.m. She had the architecture of the crime completely. What she did not yet have was either man in custody. She started with the one still inside the UAE. Crisanto Vega was found at 6:40 a.m. on October 28, 14 days after Amara Delgado's murder, in the workers' cafeteria at the Musafah Industrial Port in Abu Dhabi. He was eating rice and fried egg at a communal table near the back of the room. He had grown a beard across the 14 days. He was wearing dark jeans and a plain shirt with the right sleeve rolled partially down. Sergeant Walid Nasser of the Abu Dhabi CID entered the cafeteria on routine patrol of the port precinct at 6:38 a.m., having reviewed the circulated alert that morning before his shift. He moved through the cafeteria slowly. At the third table from the back, a man's right sleeve shifted as he reached for his cup. The lower edge of a tattoo was visible below the cuff. Nasser walked to the far end of the cafeteria. He compared the photograph on his phone. He called for backup with his radio held low against his thigh. When the officers approached, Vega looked up. He looked at Nasser. He looked at the two officers flanking the exit. He placed both hands flat on the table. Slowly, deliberately, palms down. He sat very still. He said nothing. He was transferred to Dubai within the hour. Detective Khalil interviewed him for 4 hours. He was calm throughout. Not the calm of innocence, but the calm of a man who had decided precisely what he would and would not say. He confirmed his presence at the Burj Al Nakheel on October 14th. He confirmed the catering uniform and the forged badge. He confirmed that he had followed Amara Delgado into the North Service corridor. He confirmed the ligature. He said the instruction had come by phone at 6 p.m. on October 14th. The call Khalil had already identified in the prepaid phone records, 4 minutes and 12 seconds, originating from a Manila cell tower. He would not name the caller. He said the caller had told him the wedding had proceeded and that Amara needed to be dealt with before she left the building with the sheikh. The word dealt was the word he used. He did not use another word. He said he had located her in the East Service corridor, where she had been separated from Marisol Cruz. Marisol had gone one direction looking for Amara. Vega had followed Amara in another. He said she had not had time to understand what was happening. He said this without emotion, in the manner of someone providing technical information. Khalil wrote it all in black. She wrote in red, he feels no remorse. He feels he performed a function. Find out if the 8 missing women are connected to functions he has performed before. She asked him directly about the 8 women in the Goldbridge folders. He looked at the table. He did not answer. She asked him twice more over the following hour. He did not answer either time. She left the interview room. In the corridor she wrote one sentence at the bottom of the page. He knows. That is the conversation for a different day. Make sure there is a different day. Danilo Reyes had been under Philippine National Police surveillance since October 16th, when Khalil's extradition request had been authorized through the UAE Ministry of Justice and transmitted to the Interpol Manila and CB. The surveillance had been authorized under a bilateral cooperation agreement that required 6 days to activate correctly. Khalil had spent those 6 days building every element of the legal framework before the arrest was requested. Because Danilo Reyes had 2 lawyers in Manila and 1 in Dubai, and she was not going to give any of them a procedural error to work with. He was arrested on November 3rd at 7:15 a.m. outside his property gate in Quezon City. He was returning from a morning walk. Athletic clothes, white trainers, a reusable water bottle. He looked at the 4 Philippine National Police officers and the Interpol documentation and the UAE extradition warrant, and he said, "I want my lawyer before any statement." He did not resist. He was processed without incident. His property was searched simultaneously. Behind a locked cabinet in the main office, 37 folders, organized by year, each labeled with a name, a case number, and a date. Inside each folder, the forged proxy consent documents, the financial transfer records, the placement correspondence. In Amara's folder, the newest, the thinnest, a copy of the proxy consent Rosalinda had signed. A photograph of Amara taken outside the Crescent Gulf Medical Center 4 months before the wedding, long lens, taken without her knowledge. A printed copy of the wedding announcement from a Gulf social magazine. And a handwritten note in Tagalog, in Reyes's own hand, dated September 29th, 15 days before the wedding, that translated as, "She chose to dishonor the commitment. She will understand that commitments have consequences." The note was entered into evidence. The word commitment, the same word Rosalinda had told Khalil he used in the original call 3 years ago, appeared in that note in the same context, carrying the same weight. He had been consistent. He had believed, from the moment Rosalinda signed the document, that the commitment was real, that Amara's consent was implicit in her mother's authority, that the Sheikh's proposal was an act committed against him personally. He had waited. He had been patient. And when patience reached its limit, he had sent a man with a catering badge and a steel pipe and a cord, and he had called at 6 p.m. on October 14th to confirm the instruction. 8 folders had no photographs. 8 folders ended where the paper trail stopped. Khalil had submitted all 8 to active investigation through a joint task force involving the Philippine National Police, Interpol, and the UAE Federal Public Prosecution. As of the extradition proceedings, 3 of the 8 women had been located, 1 in Kuwait, 1 in a town outside Manama, 1 who had returned to her family in the Philippines years earlier and said nothing because she did not have language for what had happened to her and did not believe anyone would receive it. They were alive. Their cases were being processed. 5 had not been found. Danilo Reyes was extradited to the UAE in June, after 8 weeks of legal proceedings during which his Manila lawyers contested the extradition on 4 separate procedural grounds and lost each one. He arrived at Al Maktoum International Airport on a Tuesday morning, accompanied by 2 Interpol officers, and was transferred directly to pretrial detention. He said nothing on the flight or during processing. His first words in UAE custody were a request for his Dubai lawyer. His trial began in October of the following year at the Dubai Criminal Court of First Instance. The charges: premeditated murder by proxy, criminal conspiracy, human trafficking, document forgery, and criminal organization. The prosecution was led by Advocate General Saeed Al-Hamrawi, who presented the evidence with the methodical precision of someone who understood that the facts required no embellishment. The 37 folders were entered in their entirety. The financial architecture of Goldbridge Overseas Recruitment was mapped across 3 courtroom sessions. The phone call at 6 p.m. on October 14th, 4 minutes and 12 seconds, Manila cell tower, received by Vega's prepaid device, was presented with cell tower triangulation and call record documentation. The September 29th handwritten note was read into the record in both Tagalog and Arabic translation. Rosalinda Delgado provided a formal deposition from Manila, where she was simultaneously facing charges under the Philippine anti-trafficking statutes. She did not travel to Dubai. Her deposition was read into the record over 52 minutes. It described the loan, the document, the revision, the phone calls, the final warning, and the night she sat at table 14 in a borrowed green gown and watched the service entrance and told herself it would be fine. The deposition's final paragraph was written by Rosalinda herself outside the formal question and answer structure and submitted to the court with a separate request for it to be included in full. It read, in translation, "I signed a document I did not read because I was afraid and in debt, and he had made a business of finding people like me. I told myself I was protecting my daughter. I know now that I made her available to the man who killed her. There is no version of what I did that was for her. I ask nothing from this court. I only want the court to know that she was the best person I have ever known, and she deserved a mother who was braver than I was." The court read it in full. The room was quiet when the interpreter finished. Marisol Cruz testified on the 6th day of the trial. She described the service corridor and everything Rosalinda had told her, the 11 minutes, the decision to go for security rather than to stay with Amara. When the defense advocate asked whether she believed Amara would still be alive if Marisol had remained with her, Marisol sat with the question for a very long time. Then she said, "I have asked myself that question every morning since October 14th. I will ask it every morning for the rest of my life. But the person responsible for Amara's death is the man who sent a killer to her wedding because he believed a document made her his property, not the woman who went to find help." She looked at Danilo Reyes when she said it. He was looking at the table. Crisanto Vega had been tried separately 3 months earlier, convicted of premeditated murder, criminal conspiracy, forgery, and unlawful entry, sentenced to life imprisonment. remanded to Al-Wathba Correctional Facility. He received the verdict without visible reaction. Philippine investigators have visited him twice regarding the 5 missing women. He has declined to answer on both occasions. Those 5 cases remain open. Danilo Reyes was convicted on all counts on December 12 after 4 days of jury deliberation. He was sentenced to 31 years. The judge's sentencing statement addressed, in its final passage, the specific nature of what Reyes had constructed. Not a trafficking operation in the conventional sense, not purely commercial, but something arguably more dangerous. A private legal fiction that a man had built around his own desire and then defended with murder when reality failed to conform to it. The sentence, the judge said, reflected both what had been proven and the 5 cases that remained unresolved, which the evidence strongly implied bore his involvement. The court could convict only what it could prove. It had sentenced the man who stood before it. The 5 names on the open files would be a matter for the investigators who had not stopped looking. Bassam Okafor pleaded guilty to accessory charges and was sentenced to 4 years. He was deported after serving 2. He has not worked in hospitality since. Rosalinda Delgado was convicted in Manila under the Republic's anti-trafficking statutes and sentenced to 6 years. The statutory minimum, reduced in recognition of full cooperation across 3 jurisdictions, and the court's finding that she herself had been systematically targeted by Reyes's debt architecture. She is serving her sentence at a women's correctional facility in Muntinlupa City. She has not spoken publicly about the case. She was given a photograph of Amara, taken at a hospital staff event 2 years before the wedding. Before any of this, Amara laughing in scrubs next to Marisol, that the consular officer arranged to be delivered to her cell. She has kept it. It is the only thing on the shelf above her bed. Sheikh Rafiq Al-Qasimi established a foundation in Amara's name within 6 months of her death, the Amara Delgado Foundation for Migrant Nurse Protection, which provides legal counsel, emergency financial support, and safe reporting channels for overseas Filipino nurses in the Gulf who believe they are operating under fraudulent or coercive contract arrangements. It has offices in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and Kuwait City. It has a specific intake stream for nurses whose families have been approached by placement agencies offering debt-linked loans. As of the Foundation's last published report, it had assisted over 800 individuals and had flagged 14 cases for formal law enforcement review. Rafiq funds it entirely from personal accounts. He has given no interviews about Amara, about the wedding, or about October 14th. He was asked once at the periphery of a business event how he was. He said, "I am doing what she would have done. I am moving toward where the need is greatest." He did not explain what he meant. He did not need to. Detective Noor Khalil remained with the Dubai Criminal Investigation Department. She declined 2 promotions offering administrative roles and returned each time to active casework. She carries the same worn leather notebook. The page with 5 names written in red at the top, the 5 women still unaccounted for from Reyes's operation, has not been closed. It has been added to. 3 of the 5 have been located since the trial. 2 have not. She has not stopped looking. Marisol Cruz returned to the Philippines when her Dubai nursing contract ended. She testified at the Dubai trial, at Rosalinda's Manila proceedings, and before a UN Special Rapporteur panel on the trafficking of migrant healthcare workers. Her testimony was cited in a subsequent International Labor Organization report on debt-bonded placement schemes targeting overseas nurses. She keeps a photograph of Amara on her dresser in Cebu, taken at a hospital staff dinner, 2 years before the wedding, before any of it. In the photograph, Amara is laughing. It is the same laugh that 600 people heard in the Burj Al Nakhil Grand Ballroom at 9:47 p.m. on October 14th. The same laugh the security camera captured. The same laugh that a man in a white catering uniform watched for 14 unmoving minutes from behind her left shoulder. Marisol keeps the photograph because she needs to remember that the laugh existed before the story did. And because she has decided, not easily, not quickly, but finally, that the laugh will be Amara's legacy rather than the dress, rather than the stairwell, rather than the 41 minutes a mother spent confessing to a detective in a hotel conference room at 4 a.m., while the flowers in the ballroom below stood in their arrangements and nobody came to clear them. The $340,000 dress was collected from the crime scene by the forensic team and retained as evidence throughout both trials. When the cases concluded, it was released from the evidence inventory. It was sent, by arrangement of the Dubai Public Prosecution Office, to the atelier in Paris that had made it. The 11 artisans who had spent 9 months on its embroidery were not told what had happened to the woman who wore it. They were told only that it had been returned. They received it in its evidence packaging and opened it carefully and stood for a long time in the atelier looking at what they had made. One of the artisans, the oldest, who had been embroidering wedding garments for 31 years, later told a colleague that she had never been able to look at that specific pattern of embroidery again without thinking of the woman who wore it on the night it was made for, whoever she was, wherever she had gone. The atelier keeps the dress in storage. They have not been able to sell it. They have not been able to alter it. They have not been able to throw it away. Goldbridge Overseas Recruitment was shuttered by the Philippine Overseas Employment Administration in November, 6 weeks after Reyes's arrest. The Salcedo village office was sealed with a government notice. The potted plants in the waiting room were still alive when the building management cleared the space. The receptionist found new employment within a month. She does not discuss her previous job. She was not involved in anything that happened. She knew only that she had worked for a placement agency that placed nurses and that the work had seemed entirely ordinary and that the office had been a normal place to spend a working day. She thinks about this sometimes. She is not sure what to do with the thinking. The Burj Al Nakheel Grand Ballroom was rebooked for another wedding 2 months after October 14th. The flowers were different. The guest count was smaller. The chandelier had been cleaned again by the same team of 8, each crystal polished by hand, because that was the protocol before every major event, and the protocol did not change because of what had happened in October. The guests arrived. The orchestra played. The bride stood at the altar and her husband said his vows and 600 people applauded. None of them knew what had happened in that room 8 weeks earlier. The chandelier threw its fractured light across the dance floor the same way it had thrown it on October 14th. The light did not know the difference. It simply fell where it fell, across whatever was below it, illuminating everything and understanding nothing. The North Service stairwell was recarpeted in December. New burgundy industrial carpet laid over the concrete. The motion-activated utility bulb was replaced with a permanent fixture, one that stayed on regardless of movement, that could not be used as a darkness. The door was fitted with a camera. These were the changes made. They were practical changes, building management changes, the kind of changes that happen after an incident and are entered into a maintenance log and signed off by a facilities manager. They did not change what had happened on the landing. Amara Delgado was 27 years old. She had worked 14-hour ICU shifts in a foreign country for 3 years because her family needed the money and she moved toward wherever the need was greatest. She memorized her patients' names. She called their families after difficult nights. She had not taken a day off in 11 months. She had cried when her husband said 4 words in her language because they cost him something and she could see that they did, and she was the kind of person who understood the weight of what things cost. She walked into a service corridor on her wedding night because her best friend's face told her something was wrong, and she always moved toward whatever was wrong. She was the most fortunate woman alive. She was in the ballroom for 66 minutes after the ceremony before the camera lost her. Those 66 minutes, the laughing, the hand on the arm, the light across the dress, are in the security footage archive at the Burj Al Nakheel Hotel, retained as part of the evidence record that was sealed at the conclusion of the trials. The footage has not been released publicly. It has not been viewed except by investigators, prosecutors, and the court. Rafiq Al-Qasimi has requested a copy. He has not been told whether the request will be granted. He is still waiting.